New York. Go, New York. Go, New York. Go. I don't care what we do for the rest of the year. And I picked against the Patriots because I didn't know what to think. I was not confident. This is like the Bills game last year when the Mac Jones led that 2-minute drill. Jacoby Brissett put his big boy pants on, led a 2-minute drill, and I have not felt that good about a victory in a damn long time. The fact that we pretty much ended a season of Super Bowl hopes. They're in piss. They're ruining Danny's love for football. Go New York, go New York, go. It's the this is one of my favorite Victory Mondays, which my wife told me today. I didn't realize you were a psychopath until I heard those words come out of your mouth. But I'm elated today.
I can only imagine, like, in a lost season, like it's not good enough to beat the Jets at some point this year, but beat them at the perfect time, the exact moment where their season is over. Like I feel like that's a special kind of fun that is really hard to reproduce.
Folks, we have got stats up the yin-yang today, too. As you know, as well, Dimes is in primetime 9-6 right now with the Steelers and the Jets. But one I wanted to point out right now, this is from Joe A_NFL. No quarterback hits an elite passer as frequently as Drake May on a per drop-back basis. So basically, for 4 games, 90 snaps, his elite rate's about 4.44%. For context, the next one is Josh Allen at 3.81 and Trevor Lawrence at 3.77. But the best one, the Jets scored 20-plus points, committed 0 turnovers, held their opponents under 250 yards of offense. From 1940 until yesterday, teams were 56-0 with those 3 metrics hit. The other one I love. Did you know that since 2019, the Jets have forced 134 fumbles and recovered 2?
That's a crazy stat. That's just absolutely insane. Like that's not statistically possible. Like that is unbelievable.
Yeah. The big thing with the game yesterday, I just want to point out from a Patriots perspective, because every pundit in the world is on, the Jets this and the Jets that. The fact that the team got called out by their coach and showed the resiliency that they did. The defense played really good yesterday. That's the one thing too. The defense played well. Garrett Wilson, his moments. Devontae Adams was invisible. Breece Hall too had a very quiet day compared to the first time these two teams met. Mm-hmm. It's just kind of those like beacons of hope for the future. It's like that's what this year is all about. And yesterday was a very confidence-building win to where, look, we have the toilet bowl this coming weekend in Tennessee. But look, it's just one of those wins that you can kind of hang your hat on and just build. But it's also just like you said, it's not the fact that this like is a win that could potentially kill their season. It's the win that kills their season.
It's the exact leverage point by which they probably will not have enough time to make it up, especially because their schedule is hard. Even if they do miraculously beat the Texans this week, which I don't think either of us expect, but we acknowledge is possible, they still have even tougher games after this. They still play the Dolphins twice. Like, they play the Bills again. Yeah.
Have to go to Buffalo.
Go to Buffalo. Tua, I'll say it again. I always love saying it on the show. Tua has never lost to the Jets, ever. He is undefeated against them in his career. And against the Patriots too. But, but this year he couldn't play in the first Patriots game at least. So at least like that got limited. But the Jets don't get that luxury. Knock on wood. You guys ended their season. You guys might get them to quit. It might be like the 2012 Eagles, where you get just enough losses that the veterans can start to give up on the season, and then you get like the blowouts, then you get like the quick games, then you get like the 4-win season instead of the 8-win season. Like that would be special if this is the tipping point for that.
So there's a few things with the Jets that I want to touch on. One is that I don't even want to call him Sauce anymore, because whatever sauce he's cooking, I don't want anything to do. Like, he has not looked good at all this year. Like, the one play where Keyshawn Boutte caught it in the red zone, he got cooked right on that route. He went whoop. Keyshawn went whoop, caught the ball.
If anyone out here has ever listened to the Badlands podcast, a great Jets podcast, a lot of their episodes are on YouTube with Joe Caporoso and Connor Rogers or Connor Hughes, my bad. Connor Rogers is the other Jets reporter. They basically said that they think it makes sense to trade Sauce because he's been disappointing. You can get value from him. Like, someone will actually probably give you like a solid pick for him. And right now they have to make a decision on whether or not to pay him. And paying him with cornerbacks, with his reputation, with cornerback salaries, means paying him like $25 million. And
he's not worth PS2 money.
Yeah, and like that's where you can kind of see like maybe trading him, because obviously whenever this era of the Aaron Rodgers era ends, they're going to start over. They're going to get a new head coach. They're going to draft another quarterback. They're going to like start from scratch and a new GM. So like it does kind of make sense.
Up, by the way, I just want to say something about that. His contract's just up. That's not like he's getting fired. That's just a thank you for your service. Now please leave the door.
Yeah, I mean, the fact that they didn't extend him in the first place already was kind of a bad sign. But yes, technically it wouldn't even be a firing because he just doesn't have a contract for next year. So the point being, they're going to rebuild. Like they're going to start from scratch. They're not going to be a competitive team once they get rid of all these veterans. It does kind of seem like trading Sauce is the only way they can kind of get some picks back. And he's like someone that you can get value for. Like there's other veterans they can trade, but like most of the league just won't care, or they're too expensive. Sauce, someone will care. Someone will give you a good pick. So yeah, didn't mean to cut you off, but yeah, to your point, he's been disappointing enough that given what they have to pay him, it might make sense to trade him.
And also my other thing too with that is just I don't see it going the Jamal Adams 2.0 route from when this is the podcast day in its infancies back to that time. But you know, Jamal Adams, he went to Seattle, he had torn ACL. I think he popped his Achilles as well. He did one of them in the Russell Wilson game. But now he's with Tennessee, and now I think he wants out of Tennessee. It's been a weird roller coaster for him. But you'll find a team that's desperate for a cornerback that will probably give him the money that he wants. Because the Jets, here's the thing, the Jets too. I know Jermaine Johnson's on IR, but he's earned a second contract, in my opinion. Garrett Wilson, you're not getting rid of. That's just stupidity. And you got Brees. Brees is the big question mark, because if it comes down to it, who do you want to give the money to? Do you want to pay Gardner? Do you want to pay Brees? You're paying Brees Hall. Brees Hall, look, I know he's had a bit of a wonky start to the year. He hasn't been the best. I know I have him in one of my fantasy leagues. But the fact that of a player of his caliber, of what you saw last year when you and I wrote him off and Danny let us hear it, you bank on that potential coming back. You bank with the right offensive system, he's going to get back to form. Now, the thing I'll say with the Jets is just it's this whole thing where I feel like what we're seeing now, and it's not to the same degree, but it's kind of like when Antonio Brown left Pittsburgh, where it's like, okay, how the hell did the Packers put up with this for so long where they just shut him down? And once he gets his own freedom and his own controls, you're kind of seeing, okay, yeah, he's a moron. The one thing I love, though, is the darkness quotes where everyone's just saying, you mean that cabin where you go to smoke crack in the offseason? But in all honesty, though, it's just like, because seriously, for them, where do you go from here? Because like I've seen their fans where it's like now, okay, you play the Texans this week, which they're -1. I don't understand that. I feel like that line's going to change unless the Vegas is really banking on this is just being a down game for the Texans, because the Texans are going to do that where they have they'll have like one good game, they'll have one bad game. Since the Patriots game, look, they lost to the Packers in a heartbreaker, and then yesterday, Anthony Richardson played terribly, and I have some stuff to say about that, but they barely escaped by. Colts plus 5.5, baby.
That's like I think the concern
next Sunday too, Sunday Night Football, Texans Lions. It's a game I've had circled for almost 6 months.
The Texans are weird because they're definitely like a really good team. I'm not trying to take anything away from them, but they're getting this Eagles vibe for me where they keep like sneaking out of these games. Like this was a 3-point win against the Colts. The first Colts game was a 2-point win. They barely beat the Bills. I mean, that's a good team, I understand, but still, like they got that game kind of by the skin of their teeth a little bit. They do this a lot where they beat the Bears by 6 points.
Their ass whooping the Vikings.
Like with the exception of, and yeah, they got usually, just my opinion, like studying the NFL for so long, the teams that win close and lose big are usually kind of fraudulent. Now,
22 Vikings.
Yes, the 22 Vikings being a great example of this, where they went 13-4. They won 13 games, they lost 4 games, and they had a negative point differential in the season. How is that possible?
By the Cowboys that year?
Yes, it was the Cowboys. It was the Eagles. They got their ass whooped by the Packers. Yes, by the Packers. And then there was a 4th team that kicked their ass as well. Like,
and there was a Colts game, too, that they had that miraculous comeback with.
Correct. And think about how crazy that is, because in the 13 games they won, they obviously had a positive point differential in those 13 games. They had such a small positive differential in their wins and such a massive negative differential in their 4 losses that they had a negative differential in the season despite winning 13 games. I've never seen that before. Probably will never see it ever again.
So they lost 24-7 against, sorry to cut you off, but 24-7 in Eagles.
Yep.
40-3 against the Cowboys.
There's a Packers.
34-23 against the Lions in Detroit. Okay. And then New Year's Day, Lambeau Field, 41-17.
Just like, and all their wins are by 3 points, 6 points, 7 points. Like that, those are usually teams I like to fade. And again, the Texans, look, Buffalo looks really, really good. It's not easy to beat the Bills. So the fact that the Texans beat the Bills means something to me. Like, and the Packers, another really good team. They almost won that game in Lambeau. So that also should be given respect. But I do wonder, as much as I love dunking on the Jets, as funny as it is, a lot of their losses have been close. A lot of the Texans' wins have been close. It's possible these teams are closer than their record might indicate. Now, to the point that I would make the Jets a favorite, no, absolutely not. Like, you don't account for the regression that much. But I would just say, for bettors out there, yes, I also think the Texans are going to win this game. I also think the Jets are frauds. The Jets suck. I agree with you all on all of those things. But be careful, because this line is kind of trappy. This, to me, is the kind of line that every amateur bettor in America is going to be like, well, obviously, Texans +1, Texas -1. Obviously. Yes, I agree. Obviously. But it's usually not this obvious. Like, usually that's when we get ourselves into trouble.
There is one that comes to mind because I remember from the second, because when the schedule comes out, week 1 lines are automatically available.
Yeah.
And there's one from last year that really stood out to me, and that was the Chicago Bears being a week 1 favorite against the Packers. And it was the same thing too, like -1.5, -2. And I was like, are we forgetting who Green Bay is? And I'm pretty sure Green Bay whooped them. So, yeah. And I remember Chicago Bears fans were just in shambles. They were just, they're doing that day what they did today, which we got to talk about that game. But ultimately, though, that's where I think that's there. One other line I saw that feels trappy, and that's only because it's me, and there's the whole thing about the week after the Lions. But the Titans are -3 going into this game against the Patriots.
Yeah, that's an interesting one. Well, do we think you would know more than I do? Do we think Drake's going to play? I would guess not.
I don't know. The team's off till Wednesday. Like, Mayo did his radio hit today. We're not going to hear anything. The Dodgers are whooping ass. We haven't heard much. I'm going to check it. Yeah, it's still sitting at -3. I don't really know. One line here that honestly surprises the hell out of me, though, early in the week, the Ravens at -9.5 against the Broncos. Are they just counting on Baltimore bouncing back, or Denver kind of coming back down to earth?
Yes, like that. Like, I'm probably going to be on the Ravens for that reason, because that's another one where when you look at the Broncos' record and the fact that they've been like blowing the last 2 opponents out, granted, Panthers and Saints doesn't mean that much, but nonetheless, they blew out their last 2 opponents. This to me kind of seems like they want you to take the Broncos. They want you to take the 9.5. And I think it's a trap. I think these are the games that the Ravens, especially coming off a loss, this is usually when Baltimore wins like 35-10. Now, I know the Broncos have a great defense, and I know Bo Nix has been playing better, but when I was watching Bo Nix before that Saints game, against the Chargers game, and even against the Jets, these games where he was having like 50 passing yards and negative passing yardage at halftime and all this and that seemed like the kind of guy that would have a blowout spot against Baltimore. Like, I know Baltimore's defense isn't that good, but still, like, just their coaching, they usually pick on rookie quarterbacks to begin with in the John Harbaugh era. They do kind of have that Belichick thing to them. So, especially after this week, where I imagine they're just going to be yelled at all week for getting destroyed by the Browns. And they weren't that healthy in the game. Nate Wiggins didn't play, and Marlon Humphrey didn't play. So nope. I think if those guys come back, I think they're gonna want to prove something. And I think with Harbaugh's track record against rookie quarterbacks, I think this could be like a 28-10 game that a lot of people don't see coming. And for that reason, I think take the Ravens, because I agree with you. Like, if you just look at their records, it probably shouldn't be a 10-point spread. I think it's because Vegas kind of thinks this might be a womp, and they want the general public like us to take the Broncos side.
It's one of those things too where they look at it being like it's a sucker's bet, where it's like, oh, the Broncos have won 3 in a row. They're 5-3. They're looking good. But if you look at who Denver's beaten, they haven't really beaten anyone great, even after I performed that fucking soliloquy for the Raiders. And
beating the Jets clearly doesn't mean anything. Like, that's no longer like an impressive win.
No, that's just the thing. For the Patriots, for me this year it's as long as we get good quarterback play, which we talked about because you and I last spoke Drake May's debut, which I've liked. We'll have to wait and see if he plays. Jacoby, he didn't play great, but he did enough, and that's all I could ask. He did what a backup's supposed to do.
Yeah, I mean, and I know it's the Jets, but still, like, the Jacoby Brissett that I saw against my Dolphins, like, I had no faith that Jacoby was going to score a touchdown. I know they came close with the Jalen Polk foot being like half out of bounds, but I had no faith that Jacoby Brissett would lead a touchdown drive with the game on the line against the Dolphins a few weeks back. So to just get that drive, like, is impressive, like, on his end. Like, you gotta give him credit for that.
Exactly. The one thing I'll say too quickly, just as we obviously talk about, we'll talk about Chicago because Chicago will tie into your game. But one thing I want to note to people for the coming game next week, the Bears are 0-3 away from Soldier Field this year. One if you count but that was a home game. So their away games this year, they're 0-3, and now you all of a sudden have I'm sorry, but the Bears game, not even the result of what happened, the Tyreek Stevenson stuff, just the fact that they looked so bad for 4 quarters, and also first time since 1975 that you've had multiple lead changes with under a minute to go. Fun fact. I learned that today. The thing with the Bears is, though, I know I said my thing about Matt Eberflus, Vic Fangio. This is the kind of game that will get him fired. When you look back on it to, why did you miss the playoffs? Oh, it's because of the Commanders game. It's not, oh, we did this. Here's the other thing, too, with Chicago. They don't have a signature win. Look at who they've beaten.
They've beaten the Jags, the Panthers,
the beaten down Rams.
The beaten down Rams with no Puka or Cup. The Titans. Yeah, it's not a great resume. What's his name? Her name, my bad. Courtney Cronin, who I guess I know she's like originally from Minnesota, but I guess she covers like the whole NFC North now. She was talking to Bears.
Right.
Yeah, so she was talking to Bears players, and she said on Around the Horn that it was kind of the first time that she had noticed Bears players kind of start to criticize coaching this year. Like, maybe because of the defensive pattern on that Hail Mary. Like, I know Benjamin Solak from ESPN did a good breakdown that you're not all supposed to just like go to a mosh pit. Like, you're supposed to like have some guy behind the pile, some guy in front of the pile, which the Commanders did. Terry McLaurin was in front of the pile to catch the rebound, and Noah Brown was behind the pile to catch the tip backwards. And apparently Bears defenders are supposed to be there too, like in front or in back, and none of them were. So Courtney Cronin kind of implied that they were very critical of Bears coaching, which they had not really done this year. So to your point, that kind of loss and the way they lost could be the starting point for how players start to turn on them a little bit.
Because Mike Florio pointed this out today too with him and Chris Sims, where he says when coaches get fired, it's not, oh, just day after the season, January 6th, and they go, yeah, we want to change this thing. No, they start brewing this around this time. This is when you really start to performance evaluate, to when you determine, hey, what directions our team going in? Because here's the other thing too, when it comes to the Bears, they play the Cardinals this week, which, look, I told you, Danny and I told y'all, buy stock in them. I know we're going to talk about your game. But after that, they play the Patriots. And then after that, you have to play the Packers twice. You have to go to Detroit on Thanksgiving, which is no longer a gimme game. You have to play the Vikings twice. You have to play the Seahawks, who I know they got their ass whooped yesterday, but are still a decent football team. And then your other punishment, guess what? You're going to San Francisco to play a Niners team that was about as if a get-right game as they could have had yesterday against Dallas. So with Chicago now, you had to get yesterday to avoid that game against the Vikings later this year. I believe it's on a Monday night, where that game, hey, if you lose, it is what it is. No, that game's a must-win for you now, to where if you lose that game, what's Kevin Warren going to say when he looks at Matt Eberflus, who's a defensive head coach? Hey, your defense had poor execution. Hey, your offensive coordinator, Shane Waldron, which we know what happened in Seattle, he had a very nasty exit. Jackson Smith-Njigba during that, I believe he was with Rich Eisen or someone during Super Bowl week, where the news broke, and he was pretty much happy, just elated about it because of everything. Wait. I was excited because I thought Darius Slayton was going to run, and we were going to get the first Dimes touchdown in a very long time. But you know what I mean with Chicago, where I look at it and I'm just like, this is the kind of loss that can not punt your season like the Jets, but it's a loss that can really start the downward spiral to where, okay, if they lose next week and go to 4-4, but then they beat the Patriots in 2 weeks, which I fully expect to happen. Let's be real. The Patriots aren't going to go 11-6. If you do that and you're 5-4 going to that stretch, but then Green Bay comes in and beats you, Bears brass and Bears fans aren't going to care about what you did against the Patriots. They're going to care about what you did against a team that, and I'm going to say this because it's my show, that's fucking tormented you for the last 15 years. That it will boil your blood when you lose to them, So that's the kind of thing I want to see. Because also, too, I don't know what they thought putting in Doug Kramer on a 3rd and goal when you have Roshan Johnson, when you have Khalil Herbert, when you have DeAndre Swift, who had a great game yesterday. DeAndre Swift played really well. So it comes down to this, where the Bears, I think change is inevitable at this point. I know everyone's like, oh, look at Eberflus, look at Hard Knocks. But I think kind of like what we're seeing with the Giants, I don't know if Hard Knocks is really the right call for Chicago this year. Because at the end of the day, it kind of does. It can be more of a killer than a benefit to the team. Yeah,
and I think that they kind of remind me of the Browns when they got Baker Mayfield, like that first year. Like, there's some energy around the team. They have some good quarterback play. They haven't done in a while, but not quite. Like, that team, I think, went 7-8-1. And, kind of something along those lines, I can imagine being similar for this Bears team, maybe like an 8-9, a 9-8, something like that. The problem for them is, like, I think there's some, like, the metrics on their defense are good. Like, and I know it's been a soft schedule, but the metrics on their defense are good so far. The problem is their division is so hard. Like, they play 3 of maybe the 4 best teams in the NFC this year. And that is, or 3 of the 5. I'm not going to completely throw out San Fran. They still deserve some benefit of the doubt.
Yeah.
But nonetheless, 3 of 5 of the 5 best teams in the NFC are all in their division. And I just don't know how you're going to get more than 2 division wins. So already that's 4 losses. You haven't played any of those teams yet. So those 4 losses all add to the 3 losses you already have. So that's 7 losses right there. So throw in just another game here and there. And yeah, it's easy to see how they maybe don't fulfill. They maybe a little, like you said, might be just too much too soon. Hey, but the Lions were on Hard Knocks the year before they were ready, and it still was good to see them. And then they leveraged that momentum the next year. So maybe the Bears can do this next year,
The thing with them right now, though, is that there's nothing that look forward to where remember that Lions team when they beat the Packers, everyone was like, hey, they're finally starting to cook. They're finally starting to get it right. Because, like, I remember, look, I know I emphasize it a lot, but the only Patriots game I've ever seen live in Foxborough was against the Lions that year, and they won 29-0 with Bailey Zappi at quarterback. So, it's one of those things. One thing I want to point out too right now with their schedule, so they have a bunch of 1 o'clock games coming up. They have a 4:20, that Niners game's 4:25, which there's a chance Tom Brady's in the building for you, which means you lose that game bad. There's gonna be a lot of eyes, and you're gonna get a lot of the criticism as compared to losing a 1 o'clock game. Like if yesterday had just stayed in the 1 o'clock window, done its thing, it's a cool moment, but it's not the center of attention. The fact that it was Nance and Romo in the building, which I want to know when the last time Jim Nance called a game in that stadium was. I would like to know it for fun.
It's probably been a while. It would have to be like some really good AFC team is going at Washington for whatever reason, and it's like a week where there's no other clear choice, like Chiefs at Commanders or something like that. Yeah,
exactly. Because I look at the rest of their schedule, one of those Vikings games is Monday Night Football.
Yeah.
And the Seahawks game is Thursday Night Football, Week 17, which that Seahawks game could very well be that could very well be a loser leaves town, like loser doesn't make the playoffs kind of game.
Yeah, because they're similar teams. They both project to be like in that 8-9, 9-8 range. So yeah, like you probably can't withstand a loss to one without that impacting tiebreakers or without that impacting your overall record for sure.
Yeah, it's like one of those things too where that game can, where it's like week 18. It's like, hey, you have to win, but then you also need 4 other teams to lose or tie. It's like it's
that, kind of a Usually when you're at that level of a team, you usually don't get the 4 other teams losing. Like usually you get like 2 of the 4 or something like that. As a Dolphins fan, this team like usually wins 9 games every year. Like I know the situation very well.
Yeah, which you know what? Well, before we get to your game, I'm just gonna say this quickly about the Commanders. Look, Jaden Daniels, he didn't have the best game yesterday, but the fact he made the throw when he had the chance to, because I'm also going to quote Chris Simpson today. You need 6-7 seconds to make something work. You made it work. You made it happen. I wasn't sure Coach of the Year at first. I was always kind of thinking Sean McDermott, but right now it's really hard to campaign against Dan Quinn, especially if they win the division.
Yeah. No, I would say
McDermott would have to get the 1 seed in my opinion.
And let's see how many wins Kevin O'Connell gets, because if they win the division, then I guess no one's expecting it at this point because the Lions just look so good. But if they were to, that would be definitely a conversation because they lost their rookie quarterback before the season started and a bunch of other problems as well.
I just want to bring up that line quickly for next week because whose line is it anyway? Am I crazy to think the Packers at +3.5 could be a potential fun little underdog bet?
No, not at all. No, I mean the game's in Lambeau. Yeah, I mean totally reasonable.
The over's one I just want to play for fun. 47.5 points. I feel like that's a pretty good one because I'm done betting CJ Stroud overs. But anyway, we're gonna do this. Yeah.
At least until wait till Nico Collins comes back.
Yeah, I know. Buffalo, I did at Green Bay. Green Bay, I'm like, hey, 47.5. Why not? Scored 19 in the first half, and then it's just like, oh, hey, we're not going to do anything for the rest of the game, and we're going to score 46 when I need 48. There's a question associated with this one that was sent to me via the DM, Randy. But before we get into it, yesterday, look, the result for you guys, it was what it was. What was your main takeaway from Tua? Just because, like, I didn't get to see any of the game film yet, but I saw the stats and it looked like he had an okay day. It wasn't anything to like gawk at, but at the same time, too, it feels like it was more of a confidence boost for Dolphins fans.
Yeah, no, he played really well. Like his box score does not do him justice to how he played in that game because the Commanders were playing with 2 deep safeties almost the entire game, and they were basically forcing us to throw it short, to throw it underneath. The Dolphins' offense was damn near perfect. Like they scored. They only had the ball 7 times. They scored on, and one of those 7 possessions was a one-play safety where there was a high snap by the center, went out of bounds, safety. The other 6 possessions, they scored 4 times. They scored 3 touchdowns and a field goal. They only punted twice the whole game. Like, the offense was leading scoring drives constantly. Their field goal drive was the 2-minute drill at the end of the first half where they were playing against the clock. If they had like no time pressure, that might have been a touchdown drive too. They played really well on offense. They scored 27 points. They had 377 yards. Like, the offense was back. I know that was a big question. And I remember I got into Matt Harmon, of all people. I was in his mentions because I think he was saying that he wasn't sure if you should start Waddle and Tyreek, because he's like, oh, I mean, I think the Dolphins' offensive problems go beyond Tua, which is really just because people don't respect Tua. Because I'm sorry, like, if the Bengals' offense was terrible without Joe Burrow, like, no one would express doubt. Oh, I'm not sure if Joe Burrow coming back fixes everything. But we do it for Tua. But we would never have done it with all these other teams. So the offense was exactly as I remembered it. It was 27 points. None of that was on a short field. The defense got no turnovers the entire game, no sacks the entire game. No, I mean, the Dolphins offense played really well. The defense was just terrible in the second half. The last 3 Cardinals drives were touchdown, and then field goal, which is what they wanted, because they got the ball with 6 minutes left. They drained all 6 minutes and kicked the field goal at the end to win the game. Like, if they needed a touchdown, they probably could have gotten a touchdown. But all they wanted was a field goal drive that drains the clock so they can win the game and get the ball last and not give us a chance to respond, which they did. So, yeah, the defense was just really, really, really bad. It was disheartening because the defense had been playing well the last few weeks. So you thought, oh, the Dolphins offense plays better. The defense will play the way it's been, and then everything will be fine. And it's kind of so Tua looked really good. Like I was even checking his PFF grade. It was right in line with what it was in the opener. The problem was you get into these situations where when you're a mediocre team, you almost like don't know where the mediocrity comes from. And I think that was the problem. It's like we thought, okay, the offense has been bad because you don't have your quarterback. So you get your quarterback back, everything should be good. But then the defense has its worst game of the year. And that really makes you realize, oh, when you're just an average team, you're inconsistent, and either side of the ball can hurt you on any given week. And I kind of feel like that's where the Dolphins are heading. Like, it just seems like any week it could be the offense's fault, it could be the defense's fault, and that's the mark of an inconsistent team. Like, I was hopeful that this would actually just be a good defense the rest of the year. But that was terrible. That was at home against the Cardinals. They had some injuries, sure, but the Cardinals had injuries too. And it was heartbreaking. It was season ending. I was there in attendance, and I couldn't believe it. I was just so confident the whole game. When I saw that the offense looked like itself again, I was like, oh, like, this will be fine. The Cardinals will get their points. Maybe we don't cover. It's fine. We're going to win by at least a field goal. And to see the defense just cave that badly, and the Dolphins punt once in the fourth quarter, and that like ends the game. Because they had to fucking score 35 to win this game, apparently. Scoring 27 wasn't good enough. And it was extremely, extremely disheartening. And yeah, I think the season's basically over. It's not over because they play Buffalo this week. If they were to somehow beat the Bills, I don't think they will. But if they were to somehow beat the Bills, mathematically, they'd be 3-5. The Bills would be 6-3, I want to say. So it would be 2 back. They wouldn't have tiebreaker over us anymore. And they still have to go at New England, which we've already won at New England. They have not yet. And
that's week 18.
That's week 18. So Drake May will be playing by then. Hopefully we'll be in a good rhythm. So yeah, it does give you some hope. And you know, the Bills still have to play the Chiefs, obviously. Like, that could be a dangerous game. They have other tough games in their schedule too. So yeah, like they play the 49ers as well. I mean, so do we. But I think they play them sooner. They play them, like, I think right when CMC comes back. So
can I just cut you off for a second? Because I know off by heart when those games are, because I was looking it up recently. The Bills play the Niners Thanksgiving Sunday. It's a Sunday Night Football game in Buffalo.
Gotcha.
You guys play them week 16, but I think it's a 4:25 kick.
Correct. We play them on the 22nd. It's like right before Christmas Eve. Yeah. But my point is,
when I'll be probably at Orchard Park, maybe.
They lost to the Texans. We still play the Texans. So in theory, if we were to win that game, that could, I guess, even the scores. So I do think if they beat the Bills this Sunday in Buffalo, then yeah, like, the season's not over. But the season is de facto over because I don't think they'll beat the Bills. And the moment they don't beat the Bills and they're 2-6, 4 back in the division is over. over. They'll have no chance to catch Buffalo at that point because Buffalo will have tiebreaker again. They'll have the same problem they had last year where they won 11 games, but the Bills had tiebreaker and it didn't matter. Same thing. So once they lose this Sunday, the division's over. And then can they win enough games at 2-6? So like maybe like, a few years ago, a few Dolphin fans have been saying a few years ago, they were 1-7. They finished the year 9-8. They've had a winning record 4 straight years. Could they win enough games to go 9-8? Maybe. But the problem with that logic is I don't think, much like how the 2021 team didn't get into the playoffs because they lost too many AFC games that killed their tiebreaker situation, same thing. They already have a loss to the Colts. They already have a loss to the Titans. Like, I don't think their conference record is going to be very good to where even if they did make the miraculous comeback where they finished the season 9-8, they would probably be on the other side of all the 9-8 teams and don't get in, as opposed to like the Chargers or the Steelers or the Broncos or the other teams that profile to have that spot instead. So, yeah, if they don't win this Sunday, I think the season's over. And I think it is unlikely they win this Sunday. So, de facto, as a result, that loss to the Cardinals ended our season.
So, a couple things. One, I heard about it, and if you saw me react, it's because I'm watching the Chris Berman's like the Sunday 2-minute drill.
Yeah.
I did not realize how bad the Kyle Hamilton bobble was until just now. Like,
it was a game ender. Yeah, it was really bad.
Yeah, like I saw that. I was like, good Lord. So with Miami this weekend, I'll be honest with you. I like you guys this Sunday.
Yeah. Look, in terms of
Kevin Harlan bump.
The Kevin Harlan bump, they are undefeated when Kevin Harlan's calling our games when Tua is the quarterback. They did technically lose to the Seahawks, but we don't count that because Tua wasn't the starter. And Tua and Kevin Harlan have a special relationship. That's where he's got Hill, he's got Waddle. Look, it's a division game. You know my philosophy.
Anything can happen too, though. I would take the 6.5 at least.
Yes, I will admit, like, is there a chance, because the Dolphins season is on the line, the players know that. Is there a chance you get like a great effort and you get like a moral victory loss where they lose by a field goal like they did a few years ago in Buffalo? Yeah, that's very possible. But unfortunately for us, the moral victory isn't fucking good enough. Like, they're 2-5. They need a victory. The moral victory will not get them into the playoffs. So they need to win. They can't just cover. They can't just play tough, play close. Oh, my God, a heartbreaker. They won on a game-winning field goal after the Dolphins fought their hearts out. Fuck that. They're 2-5. They need to win. I know it sucks, but it is what it is. But, yes, I do think there's decent value on the spread. I will agree.
The one thing I'll say, too, is just because I feel like I know Buffalo had a bit of their hiccups. It just also feels, too, like that letdown spot, where it's like, oh, look at Buffalo. They've just been plowing teams over. They've been looking great. And then it's like, Miami, they're going to take care of business after like what happened against Seattle. Because I was on Buffalo yesterday for -3. I didn't think that they were going to whoop them like that. I thought they win maybe like by a touchdown or something like that. I didn't think it would hold them to 10 points. So that's where I kind of think it's that like come back down to earth game for Buffalo, because Buffalo last year was really bad with high numbers. No, so with Miami, I'll look, I think it is what it is, but you can't. I know everyone's like, there's Dolphins fans I've seen talking, calling for everyone's heads. Chris Greer, maybe because of the backup quarterback situation could have been handled a little differently, but I don't think Mike McDaniel. I don't think so, just because you have that injury excuse where it's just like, what, Tua was out, because if Tua was healthy, look, week 2, we don't know what happens. That game was just bad for you guys. Week 3, you probably win, more than likely against Seattle. Week 4, I'm trying to remember the Simpsons Sunday Funday football. My God, I am all in on that. I just saw something that said Simpsons Sunday Funday football. I am all in for that. But I'm so distracted by the Simpsons thing they just announced on Monday Night Football. Like where you win some of those games, and then the Patriots one you have there, the Colts game you probably get. And you know what? This season is what it is. Like, I don't think there's anyone really at fault. It's just this. I would just say the Chris Greer thing because of the way the backup quarterback situation was handled, which leads me into the Randy question, which one you're going to hate. I don't know yet just because of the question is. But the other one you'll probably like. So the first one is question for Big Rat. What's the worst Dolphins game he's ever seen live? And who's your favorite backup quarterback?
They all suck. The Dolphins have had like very, very few quality backup quarterbacks in my lifetime. Okay, so the worst game I've ever seen live. Well, there's levels to this. Are we talking like the worst heartbreak? Are we talking like the most like improbable game, the least fun game? Like, there's a bunch of varying degrees to this. I would say
least fun, I would say, is probably the best way to go. Just because, like, with heartbreak, it's just like, oh, you're expecting to win, but like a game where it's just like rip the Band-Aid off for 60 minutes.
That Bills game earlier this year is up there because it wasn't just that they got blown out when we were favored that game. Dolphin fans thought we would be more competitive, but then you had the Tua concussion thing, and we didn't know that night that, like, oh, he'll be completely asymptomatic and he'll be back in a month and everything's fine. That night, we were genuinely wondering, is he out for the year? Is he going to retire? So you got embarrassed at home, and you thought the franchise quarterback was going to quit football, and you had to completely rebuild the entire organization and start over. So that was painful, I would say. In terms of the game that was the least fun, separate from that, like just thinking back throughout my lifetime, there was, okay, well, you said game I've been to, right? Not like any Dolphins home game, a game I was
no live.
Yeah.
You capitalized the L too.
Correct. Yeah, because when I was in school, there were a lot of home games that I missed where they had some heartbreakers at home. But in terms of what I was there for, 2007. Okay, I'll say this. This is my answer. In the 2007 season, the Dolphins were losing every week at home. Every week they were losing at home, and this was the year that they started 0-14. That the Dolphins at the time, the Detroit Lions hadn't yet gone 0-16. So at the time, no one had gone 0-16 yet. And the Dolphins were I want to say they were 0-13. And they were at risk of being the first ever team to go 0-16. And it was a huge weight on the entire organization and the fans because no one else had done it before. The Lions were the first one. So we were all like terrified that we would be next. They had a game to the Patriots where they were losing like 49-7 at halftime. This was the Randy Moss year where Randy Moss like mossed the ball over two people and like two cornerbacks tore their ACLs in the same play. It's like a famous play in Dolphins history that he single-handedly knocked two cornerbacks out for the season on one play. But the game I will pick is I'm looking up now. Yeah, week 13. It was week 13. It was against the Jets. We were 0-11 at this point in the season. And it was a home game against the Jets. And the Dolphins got embarrassed again. They lost like 40-13. And in the fourth quarter, the Jets were scoring touchdown after touchdown after touchdown. And then a bunch of Jets fans in my section started chanting 0-16. They started chanting that the Dolphins would be the first ever team to go 0-16. It was a very, very loud 0-16 chant that they chanted over and over and over and over again. And I remember I was leaving the game. I was in a terrible mood. And my dad was like, why do we even come to these games? Like, why should we even bother coming to the Ravens game in 2 weeks? All we do is come here to see these other fans just have a good time and make fun of us and laugh at us. It's just embarrassing. I'm tired of it. I don't want to come to games anymore. That was the low point as a Dolphins fan because we genuinely thought we were going to go 0-16 and that we were going to just get embarrassed and mocked by a bunch of other players along the way. So that would be my pit answer, Randy. Thankfully, 2 weeks later, they beat the Ravens in one of my favorite Dolphins memories of all time to avoid the 0-16 season.
I feel like if I ask you your favorite games, I'm going to get annoyed, so we won't do that. But
yes, they were. But the Miami Miracle is the answer. Yes, and honestly, like I would say, last year is the most fun I've ever had as a Fins fan because like every game was just a party. Every game was just a 40-point explosion. The 70-point Denver game's obviously up there, but yeah, the Miami Miracle beating the Patriots, that one in particular, of all the times they beat the Patriots at home, that one's probably my favorite.
Why don't ask. But anyway, the one way I want to flip the coin on that game though is that just like I was saying earlier, I don't know how good they'll be or if they'll end up making the playoffs, but there's definitely something for Arizona going forward for 2025 and beyond. That's the one thing of note. Like, I don't want to say this too. I really think Kyler Murray has matured as a quarterback, not just a person, but I think a quarterback too.
He played really well. He genuinely played really, really, really well. Like
first game in that stadium since he got knocked out of the Orange Bowl in 2018.
He played great. Like I thought Tua played well, but Kyler outplayed him. And like he kept evading pressure the whole game. He was making throws down the field. He had great pocket presence. Like, he played really, really well. I think that whole team, I think, is on the rise. I think Gannon's a good head coach. I think they have a good staff. I think you're going to see them like get a little bit better every week. And it's one of these teams we always talk about where they're not ready to like make a deep playoff run yet or even win a playoff game. 8-9. But they're ready. Yeah, they're ready to be a 500 team. They're ready to give other teams hell. And certainly they fucking stole that game from the Dolphins this past week.
So I'm looking at their schedule for the rest of the year. They play the Bears, the Jets, and then they have their bye week. But then after that, they go to Seattle. They go to Minnesota. They play home to Seattle. We go there. I almost thought about going to that game, but just tickets were a little bit more than I thought because my birthday is like 5 days later. Then they play at the Panthers, at the Rams, and then versus the Niners. So there's definitely they're chilling at 4-4 right now. There's definitely 7, 8, 9 wins there. I think that there's going to be a couple games that they let get by them, kind of like the opposite of what happened yesterday, where it's like a 27 to 25 loss because of a missed field goal. There's like kind of that vibe to them where they'll get a couple wins where it's like, oh, look at Arizona. Then you get a couple losses where it's like, oh, Arizona. But then next year, how you famously quote Mina Kimes for the Lions, where it's like, hey, look for Detroit. I think next year you're going to start seeing a lot more of the big head analysts. I'm not saying big head in a bad way. I'm just saying big head because, look, they're on the big networks. They get paid the big bucks. Hopefully you and I one day. But you know what I mean with that? That's what I mean with Arizona. It's where like January, February, March, it's, oh, hey, who can Arizona add? I think as well. I was looking it up recently. I think actually I'm going to pull up the cap because we all know going into next offseason who number one is, right? We all know. I think we're in the know. Who's number one for cap dollars?
Team.
What?
It's your team, isn't it?
139 million.
Why did I have a feeling that was correct?
I'm just trying to find the damn photo because I know, so I have it here. The Tyler Webb tweeted out. This is this is the 2025 cap space. In first place is us at 132.9, excuse me. Second place is the Raiders at 123.8. Washington in third at 121.5. And in fourth place at 118.9 is Arizona. That's something to watch for. That's where you you beef up the offensive line. Maybe go get a defensive lineman. Maybe if you want to go get Sauce Gardner to add to your cornerback.
Yeah, no, certainly. And then let me tell you, Budda Baker was a monster in that Dolphins game. Like, he's still a stud for sure.
Very underrated player. Very underrated safety. Yeah,
he's really good. There was one play where they threw a screen pass to Jalen Waddle. They had 3 offensive linemen in position ready to block, which is not always a given for the Heat. Usually the guys are out of position. They had 3 offensive linemen in position ready to block, and the Jalen Waddle was in position for like a big, like 14-yard gain, and nothing ended up happening because Budda Baker ended up just missiling out of nowhere and tackling him for like a 3-yard loss. So yeah, he's a stud.
They're also the team too, though, with Arizona where go out and do. I know I want to say what Houston did, but obviously what Houston did is different right now this offseason because you haven't paid Stroud yet. Murray's paid. Do it now before Marvin Harrison Jr. needs to get paid probably $30 million plus in a few years. So, well, I have faith too because here's the other thing as well. Arizona's drafted very well. They've had very good moments. So if you're a Cardinals fan, look, you went through a couple of years of hell. Let's just be honest with you. I know we all talk about Steve Keim and his terrible draft record, but it's looking better now, which I think there's a new general manager in the league who is Steve Keim, to where eventually he's got to pay for everything he's done just because the team's been in hell for so long. Chris Ballard.
Yeah, it's going to be.
What besides Richardson? What else have they? As I feel like I'm sorry to cut you off, but I just feel like with them, he gets this whole but Andrew Luck retired. That was 5 years ago.
Yeah. No, and I think you're seeing like what they have, like a bunch of like good players, but they don't have like that.
They've been bad since we whooped their ass to go to the Super Bowl 10 years ago.
They don't have that many like blue chip guys that you could be like really proud to say that you want them on your team.
Quentin Nelson.
What'd you say?
Quentin Nelson.
Quentin Nelson, yes, but apparently he had a down year last year. There's Jonathan Taylor and there's DeForest Buckner. DeForest Buckner, who they didn't draft, they stole him through free agency.
Our favorite receiver as well as having he was traded, by the way. He was a trade because the Niners didn't want to pay him and they drafted Kinlaw that year. And also our favorite receiver this year is not having a good year.
No, and I know he's hurt, so like I'm trying to be, because like there was that report that he was going to go on IR, and then all of a sudden he just like didn't, and it was like, what the hell is going on here? But yeah, like it is definitely a concern because they with Richardson, you're in this weird place where I think they know that Flacco's better, but how is Richardson going to get better if you don't leave him in there to keep taking his lumps? And so like you're kind of in an awkward position where I'm sure the locker room may want Flacco, but I do kind of think they kind of just have to stick with him. And yes, if Richardson's a bust, usually when you're the general manager who whiffs on a draft pick in the first 3 picks, usually you don't survive. Like that's just usually how the NFL works.
Do you know that this is actually a stat shout out, former guest of the program, Austin Gale? Anthony Richardson ranks 222nd in completion rate at 50% among 225 quarterbacks with 250 plus dropbacks since the year 2000. Do you know who the players who rank above him are?
Who? Akili Smith? No.
He's actually below him. Below him is Akili Smith, Mike McMahon, Tim Tebow. The players above him are Ryan Leaf, Ryan Lidley, Curtis Painter, Troy Smith, Jamarcus Russell, and Andrew Walker.
It's not good company. And the problem is, how do you go from like, okay, he'll improve, he'll get better. He'll go from like 44% to like 56%. How do you go from 44% to like 64%? Like, how does that happen?
Do you also know his EPA per play is negative 0.17?
I did not know that.
That was yesterday's stat. He also had Anthony Richardson is hilarious. An average depth of target over 20, a CPOE of minus 33.
Minus 33. Someone did the CPOE chart, and it's hilarious because they basically have to create an entirely new x-axis because Richardson is so much lower than the rest of the NFL that you can't see the chart properly unless you widen the screen like this. And when you widen the screen like this, it's like laughable how much worse he is relative to everyone else. But I mean, would you agree that he should just keep playing it through it? Like,
before I answer that, Aaron Schatz also has something that relates to this game. Do you know Daniel Jones is the league's second worst DVOA on passes up the middle? And the only quarterback behind him is Patrick Mahomes.
That's funny.
But yeah, I'm with you. Look, the Anthony Richardson experience is playing out, as I've said it for months, for about a month now. I've been saying it to every single person that comes on here. It's been repeated by me many times. The whole, I don't want him on my team. You have fun with him. But the only way you're going to have him learn and get better is by playing him. Benching him does nothing. I honestly think too, benching him could potentially, because if you bench him and you put in Flacco and you're okay, you miss out on the playoffs. That's a move that gets both Steichen and Think fired. I'll say this though. I don't think Steichen's on the hot seat this year, even if they miss the playoffs. But I think next year is the year where they're both in year 3. That's a shitter get off the pot year next year. Next year is the year that you need to see progression from both, or both are gone.
Yeah.
And you're drafting Arch Manning, which would be kind of funny and weird.
Well, and it's tricky firing GMs. Like, I know you brought this up with Greer. Like, there are Dolphin fans that want Greer fired. And I will agree, Greer probably has not done a great job.
But fans that want Tomlin fired every week.
Yeah. The tricky part with that, though, is, okay, you fire the GM, you get a new GM. The new GM is going to want to hire his own head coach.
That's why I say next year is the big shitter get off the pot year for Steichen. That's why I say that.
I agree. And like that's the thing with Ballard. It's like they're kind of tied at the hip. And similarly in Miami, like most Dolphin fans want to keep McDaniel but want to fire Greer. And it's like, that doesn't really work like that. Like,
one goes, the other one's eventually going to go. We know how it works.
It's a package deal. Like, you kind of have to, you either want to fire both or you fire none. Like, I think that's the way to do it. And that's why when the Giants fired Dave Gettleman like a few years ago, originally it was just supposed to be he that was fired because Joe Judge had only been there for 2 years. And it's just kind of like, okay, but if you want to get the best GM, you want the best GM to pick his own guy. So you might as well fire Joe Judge too. Even though it was kind of soon, it was just like, that's kind of how it works. You almost never fire GMs in isolation anymore.
Yep. That's just the thing. My thing for it too, though, is just the fact I don't think Chris Ballard gets enough flack for the Colts being in a pit of mediocrity, if you will, over the last 3 years. Ever since Philip, like, I only had the one season with Philip Rivers where, if you could believe, they almost beat the Bills in that playoff game. But I still remember there was that 1 4th down they shouldn't have gone for it. I think if they had kicked the field goal, they would have won the game. Correct me if I'm wrong. Wild card game. But I feel like Chris Ballard really hasn't faced any thing. It's always like, it's just on to next year. That's what it is. Like, between from the Frank Reich firing to the bringing in Jeff Saturday, which apparently the Las Vegas Raiders are the only team. Like, I saw this with the Raiders, where they're the only team to have lost to the Carolina Panthers in their last win, and the only team to have lost to a head coach by Jeff Saturday. So, but you know what I mean, though, with Chris Ballard, where it's just like, eventually it's like, the kid that never gets, it's like the boy who cried wolf. Eventually you're going to cry wolf and no one's going to, and then eventually it's going to be, Chris, what have we done lately? And it's just like, well, Jim, I know you're probably on Percocets and tweeting about the roof, but that's just my thing with Chris Ballard. I just feel like eventually there's no responsibility for action. Someone has to be held accountable.
And I do agree with you. It's time, like, even if they don't fire him this year, it is time that the conversation like amongst us NFL fans is such that we at least put him on our like hypothetical hot seat. And it's like, if they do better, they do better. Then don't worry about it.
More going into 25.
Yeah, but it is at least time, because we do this with other coaches. We do this with other GMs. Like every NFL fan can tell you like the 5 coaches they think get fired at the end of the year, or even, and some can even tell you general managers as well. It should be similar. It should be like, okay, we'll put Chris Ballard in that list that we have, like of people that are in trouble, just so he faces the accountability, like you said.
I was thinking about this today, just of a list of people who are in trouble. There's one right now who I think could be in trouble, but I think will escape it. That's Stefanski. I think if the Browns can finish like 6-11, so they're 2-6 right now. If they finish 7-10, meaning that they go 5-3 in their last 8, I think that's enough to save his job. But if they do any worse than that, if they're a 5 or 6 win team, then I think he's gone.
Yeah,
I still think Zach Taylor is one to watch.
Zach Taylor's very one to watch. And what's his name? James Palmer, who now works for Underdog and works the Heed the Call podcast. He doesn't work for NFL Network anymore, but he's still a reporter. And the Heed the Call podcast, the continuation of the Around the NFL podcast, they had him on to talk about head coaches in the hot seat in the preseason. And they were going through like, okay, the guys that are safe, you know, like, and the guys that like are probably fine. And one of the guys they mentioned that's probably fine was Zach Taylor. And that was the one name that James Palmer was like, I don't know about that one. Even this is before the season. He said, look, guys, here's the thing. Like the expectations are very, very high in Cincinnati, and they play in a very hard division. They finished 4th in the division last year. Yes, Burrow was hurt, but they actually had a better winning percentage in the games that Jake Browning started than in the games that Joe Burrow started. And so he kind of said expectations are very high in Cincinnati. It's one to watch. Now, notoriously, Cincinnati, obviously, they gave Marvin Lewis like 17 years. So maybe if it were a different organization.
They weren't expected to go to the Super Bowl those years, though. They were expected to be in the playoffs and win.
And they never had a quarterback as good as Burrow either. Like that's the standard is. And Burrow, by all accounts, Burrow is playing well. Like it's not even like you can't even blame his injury or it being his fault. So yes, and I agree with you on Stefanski, because here's the thing: you guys have Alex Van Pelt. I remember I was watching Albert Breer on one of your guys' Boston affiliated networks that come on my YouTube recommended page, because I hate watch the Patriots for so long that I follow like all their beat guys, and they won it.
Many who are friends of the show.
And yes, that was the exact show it was. Thank you very much. And Breer said then that you guys have Alex Van Pelt because Paul DePodesta and Andrew Berry were disappointed in Deshaun Watson's development in the Browns offense last year, before it fell off a cliff this year. And for that reason alone, Van Pelt got fired. So you do wonder, it's like you said, how many wins is enough? Because even if he plays well with Jameis, if the plan is that Watson's their quarterback next year, you could like, I feel like we as a show have been ahead of this, saying this all year. Like, if you're going to bring Watson back next year, clearly the Watson-Stefanski pairing does not work. You either change the quarterback or you change the head coach.
Yep.
So
we'll see. But here's the thing, though, because getting rid of the quarterback, what good does it screws you financially? I'm not trying to say the F word. It screws you financially. So I think that's where Stefanski goes. You know, where it's
that's where Stefanski would go, because they can't take the cap hit. The only other thing they could do, I've seen someone point this out, you draft a quarterback in the 1st or 2nd round, and then you just give Watson the RG, like that year that RG3 got benched for Kirk Cousins, and RG3 just kind of like disappeared for the entire season, the 2015 Commanders season. That's probably what you do, where you draft someone in the first 2 rounds. You don't cut Watson, but you just kind of like push him to the side. Like they had RG3 working scout team that year. Like
bury him in catering, you can say it.
Yeah, burying him in catering. Basically, we're going to pay you. Like we have no choice, but you don't really have to like grind here if you don't want to.
If this wasn't a Danny Dimes in primetime, that would probably be the episode of the podcast. Other coaches I look at, like Doug Peterson's pretty much a foregone conclusion at the end. I think he stays till the end of the season, though. I think it would be very dysfunctional to fire him now. You know, just let the season ride out. Their season's done. It is what it is. AFC East, look, Jets are going to have a new coach, but we already know that. Gerard Mayo's not going anywhere. I know there's Patriot fans who want him fired, but that's the one thing I'll say with the Patriots right now. Basically, it's so funny with so many of them, because there's a lot of them that were told, hey, we're going to be bad this year. We're going to suck. Okay. Yeah. And then they're pissed off that we suck. So it's just like,
it's like the reality of winning in July versus like September, October, where you're like feeling the pain of a loss every single week. It's like a different, even though like it's like you said, like the organization knew this is the most likely record at this point in the season, but it's a whole different saying that in the summer versus being in a bad mood 6 days a week, every week, because you keep losing.
Yep, exactly. AFC West, look, I still think Antonio Pierce, even though I doubt it'll happen.
Yeah, I think, no, I agree with you, though. But, like, how bad does it get? Like, they're 2-6 right now. They play the Bengals next week. If this is like a 3-win season, I feel like it's easier to make the interim coaches one and done, because like you weren't like that committed to them in the first place. It's not like you did a hiring search. Truly, like they only hired him because I think they were upset that they didn't keep Bisaccia in 2021 and they went with McDaniels. And so they tried to do the opposite of that this time, even though they probably should have kept Bisaccia back then and just not kept Pierce this time.
But let Telesco hire Brandon Staley to go coach Vegas.
Oh my God, that'd be so bad. But yeah, so Pierce, I think Pierce is one to watch on the list. I think the rest of the AFC West is safe. I think the AFC South, is Brian Callahan going to be a one and done? I don't think so. But again, it's a question. Again, it's a question of how bad does it get? Are we talking 5 wins? Are we talking one? I feel like any 1-win team is at risk of getting axed.
Yeah. I just can't see ownership signing up for that, because I feel like next they're gonna let him like pick his basically they're gonna let him to pick his quarterback, the thing that they should have let the Giants do a few years ago, but I have some thoughts on that in a bit. And do that, and then like I said, Steichen's gonna be a guy going into next year. Also, I just want to go off track for a second because showing on the TV. Is Cameron Hayward a first ballot Hall of Famer?
I think he's a Hall of Famer. I don't know if he's first ballot. I think he's a Hall of Famer. I think he's a Hall of Fame interior defensive player, both given longevity and strength. Let me see how many All Pros he has. I'm pretty sure
they just flashed it. I think it's 3 All Pros and 6 All Pro Bowls.
That's pretty strong. That'll get you there. He played for a long time too. He's still playing at a high level in his advanced age.
I think it's a 200 game.
200 game. Wow. Yeah, he's played since 2011. He's a Walter Payton Man of the Year, 3-time first team All Pro, a 2nd-team All-Pro, and a 6-time Pro Bowler. Yeah, I think that'll rank pretty high up there. When you factor in the longevity and the counting stats that he's going to have.
My ADD acting up.
And in terms of other coaches, Salah's already fired. And then
I have a hot take one for you next year.
What?
If the Texans, what?
Okay. No, never mind. Continue.
If the Texans this year, say if they make the playoffs, but then they end up, and also if you're wondering why we're not talking about the game because the game's pretty boring. If the Texans have a bad year and lose in the wild card round this year, is there a chance DeMeco Ryans seats a little? Not saying it's going to happen, but is there that little like warm and toasty feeling underneath them where it's like, hey,
not losing the wild card round, but maybe like miss the playoffs entirely, kind of like what happened with the Jags. The Jags 2 years ago went 9-8, won the division, won a playoff game. The next year, they missed the playoffs. And then this year, it's like we're all expecting Peterson to get fired. So I think it would have to be missing the playoffs rather than a wild card loss. But yes, if you miss the playoffs with a team this good, with the expectations this high, expectations are a bitch. It's why McDermott may get fired. Like, I don't think he deserves it. I don't think he will. No. But imagine if they lose in the divisional round to the Chiefs again. Like, you will get to a point where you ask yourself, how can we keep doing this? How can we keep doing the same thing over and over again? Like you see, kind of like how Dan Reeves, for the Broncos with Elway, kept losing in the playoffs over and over and over again. John Elway with the Peyton Manning Broncos too. Like, eventually you get to a point where we can't keep doing this.
John Fox.
Yeah, I tried to say John Fox. I don't know what I said.
You said Dan Reeves.
Yeah, then I tried to also add in John Fox. But yes, both examples apply.
NFC North, I think it's ultimately just the one.
NFC North? Oh, NFC North.
Ooh, and we got a return. Flag, it's coming back.
Oh, yeah, Eberflus. Yeah, we already talked about that.
Yeah, Eberflus we already talked about. The South, I don't want to talk about Dennis Allen because that's another Doug Peterson category. People were starting to talk about this today. Should Todd Bowles' name be thrown in that hat if they miss the playoffs?
I wouldn't do it. Oh, shit. The penalty was in the Giants. God damn it. Sorry. This is horse shit.
Steelers.
I'm clearly on the right side. This is bullshit. Well, the game's not over yet, but yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, no, like I think I've just started hearing it today with Todd Bowles. It's one of those things where I'm not saying he's a bad coach, but it's kind of the same thing, the Sean McDermott syndrome, where it's like, can he only get you so far?
Yeah, I think it'll depend on, because, losing that Falcons game was a killer because now the Falcons have tiebreaker. And that's, as I've seen all the time. Yeah, and the problem is because of all those teams in the NFC North that are probably going to get playoff spots. If you don't win your division in the NFC, you are not guaranteed to get in because the NFC North is probably taking 2 of the wild card spots at least. So the third, it's tough. It's tough. Like, so yeah, I think, look, I do agree personally that Todd Bowles has a ceiling, but they've won the division 2 years in a row. They won a playoff game last year. I do think there should be some grace, especially with the Godwin injury. So I personally would not fire. I mean, he owns Jalen Hurts. He owns the Eagles every time he plays them. So that matters. So I think Bowles would be what you were saying about, what's his name? Who is it you were just saying about? Oh, D'Amico Ryans. Yeah, not fired, but toasty.
Yeah, I agree with that too. Dave Canales is another one I worry about because the owner has been quiet all year, but yesterday he had some Bronco fans kicked out for shouting stuff at him in his box at the game in Denver. It went wild there. I reported. I saw it on Twitter, but I just think he shouldn't be. I think Dave Canales is a fine offensive mind, but it's one of those things where ownership's just so unpredictable. You don't know what they're going to do.
Yeah, I
what he's going to do. Excuse me.
Yeah, I think it's pretty self-explanatory. Like if it's a bad ownership and you're at risk of going 1-15 or 2-14, you're always at risk. I think it's very possible. And I mean, they hired him to help develop Bryce Young, and then he immediately benches Bryce Young. And yes, Dalton played better than him, but it does kind of like now if Bryce Young is not the quarterback, I don't know what they said today. Maybe they are going back to Dalton. I'm not sure. But if Bryce Young is not the quarterback going forward, it's kind of like what are you evaluating him on? Like you're evaluating him on his ability to coach a good team out of Dalton and a bunch of veterans that don't want to be there. They're apparently going to trade Deontay Johnson this week. Like I just like what is he doing well? Even if you don't blame him for anything, what is he adding? What is he contributing? Like what can you really point to? So yeah, I think he's definitely at risk.
There's another player on that team who I've actually been impressed with over the last month. That's Xavier Legette.
Yeah, he's playing better. He apparently, we still have to see. He keeps saying that his horse celebration, whenever he scores a touchdown, he says it has 2 parts, but he needs to score 2 touchdowns in the same game for us to see the second part. So Bryce, Dalton, all these guys, help us out here, man. Let's see the second part of that celebration penalty.
Yeah. So that's the thing I just say with the Panthers, where it's the unpredictability. It's the fact that like essentially it's that should have been a roughing the kicker penalty too, potentially on Steelers. It's the fact too that they basically, I don't want to say it's to the same degree, but it's kind of like Dallas but worse, where it's like, hey, you're expected to turn around this shit show, but we're not going to give you any help in doing so because we're going to trade Brian Burns for nothing and we're going to do all this stuff here. And also the fact that they just hired a new GM in Dan Morgan. And Dan Morgan seems to like have kind of full autonomy. Like I said, you haven't heard Jack about David Tepper doing stuff all year until the whole thing in Denver yesterday. So it's just David Tepper's too unpredictable to count. Mike McCarthy's another one. Contract runs out. But eventually, I'm even going to say this, I don't think this year's been his fault. I think it's going to be a complete house cleaning. I think all the coaches are gone. Zimmer, Fossil, Brian Schottenheimer, etc. It's just for me, I think Dallas is getting to the point eventually where the Carney's grift is starting to show its true colors. It's kind of like I was saying this to myself today. I know you don't watch that much WWE anymore. Actually, I don't know how much WWE you still watch, but you know how in like 2018 and 19 it was really bad, but you knew that the person in charge was like in love with what's going on, and it's still, hey, we have eyeballs on us. It's the same sort of thing now with the 24 Cowboys, where he won't ever give up power. Jerry won't ever give up power. And look, I like the way that the WWE changed hands. I pray to God that doesn't happen for Jerry Jones, just because, like, look, what happened was horrible, and that's another topic for another day. But you have, and I've said this for like 5 or 6 years now, you have to get a football mind running the football ops. And for everyone saying, oh, Bill Belichick's going to go there and fix everything. What? Bill Belichick's going to, what do you think Jerry's going to do? Oh, hey, stop people having tours and tapping on the glass like we're zoo animals while we're trying to train and lift and practice. The fact, too, their cheerleaders have a show on Netflix. I even watched it this summer, but the Dallas Cowboy cheerleaders. And for everyone out there going, oh, America's team is now the Detroit Lions. No, it's not. America's team will always be the team with the goddamn star in their logo, because no matter how annoying the fans are, no matter how high expectations are for them, even though year in and year out they're going to disappoint you, guess what? They will always be the team that you watch and have eyeballs on because at the end of the day, the Dallas Cowboys are a driving force and what makes this league money every single year. So with that being said of Dallas, I just don't know where they go. They're just going to keep selling this grift of we're America's team. We have the highest rated games of the year. We have primetime games when we shouldn't. But you know what? We're going to sell it to you anyway, and you're going to buy it because you're an idiot. That's what the Dallas Cowboys operate on. So I don't think they're going to get Bill Belichick too, because he can go in there and say the same thing I was saying before with the tours of the facility while they're training and practicing. Jerry's not going to say no to that. They're going to clash heads. Bill's going to want to bring in his home guys. Bill's going to say no. They're going to have to go out there and probably grab a head coach that either, not that no one wants, but kind of isn't that like what Dan Quinn was with Washington, but it doesn't go this year on how Washington's been. You know?
Well, and hey, look,
the Cowboys coming to my Dallas Cowboys TED Talk.
And this doesn't really happen in the NFL. This is more so a thing in college. But in theory, you know, if you're a head coach of another team that doesn't have as bright of a future, it could be the situation where like you kind of talk yourself into switching teams. Like I'm not saying that would happen, but I'm saying it's possible because if you're going to leave your team for Dallas, you're probably getting paid more. You're probably getting more marketing opportunities. There's a reason you probably might be getting a better quarterback than whichever quarterback you had. I'm not saying any current head coach would do that. I'm saying it's possible. And yes, I agree with you on McCarthy. I don't know if we mentioned Dennis Allen. We don't have to talk about him very much. Like that's self-explanatory. But yeah, Dennis Allen would also make sense. I agree with you on McCarthy. Dable
rebuild go like Matt and I'm sorry to cut you off, but Matt Beast and I talked about this last week. I think that they're getting ready for like 3 or 4 years of hell.
Yeah, I think the Carr injury was in a way a blessing in disguise because like
they are what we were last year. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, and it kind of took the decision out of their hands. It's like you're going to keep losing. Now you're 2-5. If they lose, I mean, God, if they were to lose to the Panthers this week, like good Lord, like
things that might really get DA fired. I'm not even kidding. That might get him fired.
So like I think the Carr injury kind of forced them to lose games to keep them out of competitiveness. Where now the like organizational path is a little more clear. Whereas if they were like 500 right now, you would still be like the will they, won't they? Like, well, do they want to keep up the charade? The fact that they keep losing now, I think, gives them a clear direction. Like, okay, this is where you're supposed to go. You're supposed to rebuild properly and not like string this old core along anymore.
Cam Jordan probably going to retire. Tyrann Mathieu may retire. Demario Davis, who, by the way, one of the more underrated linebackers of the last 10 years in the NFL, probably will retire as well the next year or two. So it's just there's a lot of it's going to be tough sledding ahead for the Saints. But you know what? They have a Super Bowl. They have their, I know their glory days weren't as glorious as some other teams, but still the fact that a team that had nothing was one of the more prominent teams of the last 15 years is something to hang your hat on if you're a Saints fan.
Yeah, and I think the NFL moving the trade deadline an extra week to where now I think it would normally be like this week and now it's next week. I think that's good because you get through like 8-9 games of the season. You get through more than half the season and teams can make clear decisions. Like if the Saints were to lose this week and you're 2-6, I think they'd be 2-6. I think they had a bye week, or maybe they're 2-6 already. Whatever.
I'll take a look.
They might be 2-6 already, so I could be wrong on that. But in any event,
they are 2-6. They have their bye week 12.
Okay, so if they were to lose this week, they'd be 2-7, and you will have lost to the Carolina Panthers. It gives you a clear understanding that you need to sell veterans, and they have veterans on this team that people might want. I know they just extended Kamara, but they have Marshawn Lattimore. Is he going to play more games in the Saints jersey? You know, like you mentioned with Demario Davis, like Honey Badger. Like there's guys that can move.
Those were more retired. Honey Badger, Davis, and Jordan are more retire than trade away. I think, and also to Ramczyk, probably going to have to medically retire as well, which is very unfortunate. He was a hell of a guard or hell of an offensive lineman. I forget the guard or tackle. But they also have questions too, because like Chris Olave is doing a new contract, and do you trade him or do you keep him? You know, there's a lot of uncertainty with the Saints to where they're going to have to start buying low on guys, and they're going to have to start drafting and just you got to draft and develop, trade these guys for draft picks, kind of like the Patriots did today, which we'll talk about later. Nick Sirianni, I'm going to say this. I'm going to say two things about the other teams in the AFC East and the NFC East, excuse me. Nick Sirianni, I would think would have to take a colossal failure at this point, or if they get in as a wild card, I think he's good. I know fans are going to want him.
Yeah, if they miss the playoffs, I think he's gone because their expectations are high in Philly. They thought they would be a Super Bowl contender. But yes, as a wild card, that could be a different story.
And my other take is too, neither one of the men wearing blue should go. I know it's a crazy take. Shane and Daboll.
Oh, okay. Giants. Yeah, gotcha. I don't think they will.
No, I think because I started getting back on this because look, both men would get jobs. They're not like, oh, we're going to fire them to hire them, but they're going to end up somewhere. And it's going to be one of those things where Dave Allbeginning becomes another revolutionary offensive coordinator. So I think after this year, look, you can, I'm going to say this right now, Big Rat, wherever he ends up, even if he's not playing, we still got to keep the bit going. We still got to keep it up.
Daniel Jones, if Daniel Jones is like for the, like I'm trying to come up with the Panthers. If he's like the Panthers, like veteran backup quarterback next year and is starting a Monday Night Football game, absolutely. Daniel Jones at primetime will survive. I feel like right now we could very well be watching the last Giants Daniel Jones at primetime because yes, there's the Cowboys game, but Thanksgiving during our Thanksgiving during the day, 4:00 game. That's really hard for anybody to record during that time. And also, it's not even the first time. Like he was on primetime on Thanksgiving, I think 2 years ago, and
they covered +11, and I got laughed at, but they covered it late.
They covered it at the very, very end. But yeah, it's like Daniel Jones. I agree with you. I think the Maras are going to give Dable and Shane one more chance. I think they're going to blame everything on Daniel Jones, and they're just going to be like, we're going to give you a chance with a new quarterback to start fresh. And I think they'll go from there because you are seeing some signs from the defense. Before that Eagles game last week, I think the stat was they hadn't allowed more than 21 points in all their games except one. Like everybody else was 21 points or less.
Dexter Lawrence is a hell of a defensive tackle. I think he's number 2 behind Chris Jones.
Yeah. So and the Brian Burns trade, even if they gave up a lot to get him, like he's still like making an impact.
He's starting to come along.
So yeah, I would tend to think that I think the Giants would get another chance for sure, in my opinion.
And also too, the fact you have Malik Neighbors now, you can go out there and that was clean defense. The other person, I keep forgetting Scotty Miller's on the. I keep forgetting he's on the Steelers now. Buccaneers legend. My thing too with the Giants is as well. Oh, here's the other thing too. Evan Neal, you just move on past that. He really, good Lord, flamed out. But Kayvon Thibodeau, that is a man you pay this coming off season.
And I can't really, I don't like how we do the draft where like anytime the player's bad, the GM gets blamed. It's like there were a lot of teams that would have taken Evan Neal in the top 10. He was a highly rated prospect coming out from Alabama.
It's not like, who's not playing any better.
Yeah, it's not like it was a risk. It's not like it was a reach. Like they drafted him where he was supposed to be drafted, and it didn't work out. Like every other NFL team, the most of them would have done the same thing. So I always, this shit always bothers me whenever we're like killing these GMs for bad first round picks when there were consensus picks that anyone would have made. You kill them for reaches, or you kill them for like not having good positional value, like never, like the whole Gettman thing about never trading down. Like that to me is legitimate. It's like, okay, that's bad GMing to never ever trade down in your history until they did it with the Bears, amazingly enough, for them to get Justin Fields,
which got them Evan Neal.
Yeah, and unfortunately it went to waste, but it was a good theory and process. I'm sensitive to this because I had to deal with this like with the Tua Herbert stuff, and I deal with it with like the Bryce Young, CJ Stroud stuff too. It's like most people had Bryce Young as the top quarterback coming out. The rumor was the Texans had Bryce Young as the top quarterback coming out too. Like I hate this like hindsight bias. Like obviously you never take Bryce Young over CJ Stroud. That's ridiculous. That's not what people were saying in April. Like, so yeah, same thing with Evan Neal. Like, I think it's perfectly legitimate.
Ooh, what a catch there by Van Jefferson with a catch. Yeah. So like the only, which also that's another person too. I think Jacksonville, Trent Baalke, you might have to consider firing as well. Because that is the inexcusable one. I am sorry. I know he's out right now with a broken leg. Aiden Hutchinson, he was on a DPOY trajectory. I think I said that to you 2 weeks ago because that's when the injury happened. He could have won the award this year. I think he will win it one day in his career. But the whole Kayvon Thibodeau, Evan Neal thing, look, Evan Neal, the fact too that you had 2 first-round picks, you hit on one of the two. It's kind of like, look at even the Giants this year. Like, you can think about it. They had 3 first-round picks that year. They had Sauce, they had Wilson, they had Jermaine Johnson. You hit on 2 of 3. That's pretty good. It's kind of like the Saints too, where look, they got Chris Olave, but at the same time too, they took Trevor Penning, and Trevor Penning really has not panned out for them at all. You flame Bill Belichick for the N'Keal Harry draft pick, for the Cole Strange draft pick. Mac Jones, you don't, because look, that's going to be in a book one day that we're going to learn a lot about the whole Mac Chronicles of the Patriots. But yeah, with the Giants this year, like they are starting to build the foundations too. You have a left tackle on Andrew Thomas. You just have to work on building the rest of your line up because the rest of their line is just atrocious. But you may have found a diamond in the rough with Tyrone Tracy in the 4th round. Malik Neighbors is your franchise wide receiver. They need to get a tight end. They need to get some more safeties. Micah McFadden's been a very good linebacker for them. The Giants have pieces. But I think you have to stretch to the fan base to give it some time, get the right quarterback, bring in some more pieces because because here's the other thing too. If you clean house this year, if John Mara decides to do that and just say, we're going to let everyone go, what's that telling to incoming players that, hey, do we want to go somewhere where there's these new names and faces we don't know? Or do we want to go place for somewhere where, look, it's been a couple rough years, but we know that they are credible people. You want to do that. So ultimately, the keys to how the Giants are long-term is in John Mara and Steve Tisch's hands.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I feel like ultimately they'll make the right decision. It might take some time, but I think it'll be okay at the end of the day. Like, I think give them a chance with a new quarterback, with a better quarterback. Give them another year to, because they're going to have a high pick this year, whether that's a quarterback or whether that's another player. Another year to build the roster. Yeah, I think they'll be better next year than they are right now. Because I think you see some of the signs. Like, I think you see the defense genuinely getting better every week. I mean, every year, not necessarily every week, but every year.
Well, better this year though than under Wink, because last year there was a lot of crap under Wink Martindale.
Yeah, exactly. So I think they'll be okay. I think the mayor will do the right thing. He'll give them another year, and then we'll go from there.
I'm going to go a little bit more in depth with that as Giants fan and very good friend of the show, Alex Lorenzo, and I are going to get you ready for Week 9. But then also we're going to talk a little bit more about the Giants. And then, like I said, yeah, Sirianni's the same thing. Just if they miss the playoffs, I think that's it. They miss the playoffs. They get to the wild card round again and lose. It'll be the same thing as last year where you're going to be calling for his head. And that's just it. NFC West, I say this every year, but if they don't win the Super Bowl, do Shanahan and Lynch start not to feel get fired, but do they start to feel pressure of you guys have been here for almost 10 years and there's nothing to show for it?
I don't know. They've come so close twice, like two Super Bowl losses, is impressive. They've come really close.
Missing the NFC Championship game all but 1 year since 2020.
That's really hard to do. Like, only the Patriots and the Chiefs do shit like that. Like, go to 4 NFC title games in 5 years. Like, that's not something that's normal for every other franchise. Like, yeah, 2019, 2021, 2022, 2023, 4 in 5 years. That's unprecedented. And 2 Super Bowl appearances. Yeah, I think not yet. I think if they have a bad year where they lose in the wild card round, and then they do it again next year where they lose again in the wild card round, I think then we can start the conversation. I think there's nothing, especially losing Ayuk for the year and having to deal with that whole mess about his contract. I think there's almost nothing I would do to fire them. Or, no, I know you're not saying fire them, to have the conversation about it. When they lost Ayuk the entire year, his entire offseason was ruined with that contract negotiation, and CMC was gone the first 9 weeks of the season. You're good in my eyes.
Yeah. I just say it just because eventually I'm just like, when do San Francisco fans start to get restless like Philly? But I think that they're just appreciative because they basically, after Harbaugh left, there was some shit they had to dig themselves out of with Tom Sula and Jim Kelly.
And it does become a Dan Reeves thing at some point, like for sure. Or Andy Reid with the Eagles, another example. Now, granted, that took time because he made 4 straight NFC title games and a Super Bowl, and made another NFC title game in 2008. It took Andy Reid 3 or 4 years. I want to say 3. No, 4. It took Andy Reid 3 completely non-competitive years. 4. Yeah. 4 years where you weren't even in the conference title game before he got pushed out of Philly.
Can I have a really weird not a hot take? This is a take that I have about them. I think that there's a trade for someone next year that you don't see coming, kind of like when there we go.
God, why is Russ so much better than Justin Fields?
Let's go. I'll say this too. If the Steelers somehow are in the division talk, I think there's a chance Mike Tomlin's up for Coach of the Year. I will say this about the Niners, though. I think that there's a world where they trade someone off big this offseason because if Brock Purdy is going to want a big contract.
Yeah.
I'm going to throw a name out there. What if a team comes offering a boatload for number 85?
Doable.
I know he's a cornerstone. He doesn't grow on a tree, but you know what I mean?
Yeah, no, and I would
an aging tight end. I know George Kittle's still great, but you know what I mean. Like with San Francisco, you have to think long term.
I wouldn't be surprised if it's number one. I know no one wants to have that conversation, but the reason I say that is because they just paid Ayuk. They just used another first round pick on a wide receiver. So, and they can always use another first round pick on a wide receiver. His rushing ability as he gets older, I don't know.
Really well last night too.
Yeah, he did, and he's really good. But like in that Super Bowl, he had like 11 targets and 3 catches because he couldn't really consistently beat man coverage because he is kind of a tweener. He's an awesome player. He was first team All Pro for a reason a few years ago, but he is kind of a tweener receiver where he's like a wide receiver running back hybrid, and he's not like the kind of wide receiver that can run the full route tree against man coverage and consistently win. He's very, very good in this scheme and in this design, and he's a great player. He's a great, great, great player. But I think you can get a lot of value for him. Like I said, I don't know if he's going to run that much as he gets older. So you lose that part of his game anyways as he's aging. And when you look at where they've invested their resources, why does it make sense to pay 2 wide receivers top of the market contracts and another receiver you got in the first round? Like that on top of the tight end and the running back that are already really involved in the game plan as is. So I think it makes sense. I'm not saying they would do it. I'm just saying I think it's feasible.
Yeah, I threw out 85 there because, you know, it's that we never saw this coming. Also San Francisco next year, they're okay for cap room. They have 55.9 million, but I think in order, because I talked to Danny about this and also to the Chiefs of 27.2. So that's something to watch for. But with the Niners, I just looked at 85 where I'm like, you know, because I think number one's Debo's the player everyone you expect him to get traded. You know, it's going to be his name's going to be in the rumor mill. It's going to be circulating. If there's a tight end needy team out there that's like maybe on the precipice of contending or thinking about going for it, look at what the Lions did with Hawkinson. The Lions, they got rid of Hawkinson and they moved on to Laporta.
They traded him in division. Yeah, no.
Sam Laporta's a hell of a tight end.
People need tight ends. So like I could see Kittle having that demand on the market for sure. We're gonna have to clarify. Purdy's, like you said, Purdy's gonna make like more than Dak made, unfortunately. Like
it's gonna the day that it happens, it's going to set Twitter's gonna go scorched earth, and I am fully ready for it as I think they're playing Renegade at Heinz Field at Acrisure. It's Heinz Field. Kansas City Chiefs. Look, we'll just talk about them quickly. The best team in the league right now. They're 7-0. Do you think there's any fatal flaws there with them, or do you think that this is what they're doing is sustainable for another 3 months?
Is it sustainable to like go 16-0? No, hell no. Like they'll lose multiple games before it gets to that point.
They play the Broncos in a couple weeks. I think that could be the game.
Yeah, and I wouldn't be surprised if they lose like some dumb game that no one expects. Like truly, like I'm not saying it'll happen, but like I think it could be in an environment.
Carolina.
No. I think it could be an environment like this Bucs game on Monday Night Football, where it's like an NFC team that doesn't affect the AFC playoff race. That it's at home, they kind of take the game for granted, they kind of get a little relaxed, and they just kind of lose the game out of nowhere. Like I think it could very easily be something like that. Like if they were to, I don't think they play them, but if they were to play like the Bears in Chicago, like that's an example of like so. And we just talked about the Bears. It's not even like we think they're that good, but I think we could just like have a random stinker game just out of boredom because Kelsey even said last year that they genuinely had problems with complacency. And your Patriots like maybe have had to deal with this too, where they genuinely get bored during the regular season. And so the division games, I think they get up for. Denver might be good enough to just beat them anyways because their defense is that good. But division games they care about, like playing the Bills, they care about that. I think a game where you just catch them sleepy, where you catch them bored, where you catch them like not on their P's and Q's, I think that's a game they can lose. So is it sustainable? Is it sustainable to go undefeated? No. Is it sustainable to be the 1 seed? Yeah, I think. I don't know if they're going to lose more than 2 or 3 games. They've been getting very lucky in close games. Their underlying metrics are not that impressive. It's not that highly rated of an offense, despite the names on the offense. So I do think they'll get some losses, but they do just have this innate ability to just like make the right play at the right time. Like it's the cliche bullshit people said about the Patriots for years. Like when it's 3rd and 7, Mahomes will get a 9-yard completion. Like it's just, it is truly uncanny in that sense. But yeah, they'll lose. They'll lose multiple times. But they're going to need to lose like 4 or 5 times to not be the 1 seed, and I have a hard time seeing that.
Yeah, so I actually found 3 games, and one's a division game. The first is I'm going to say the second. So out of the team order, I'm going to say the second team first. That's December 15th at Cleveland.
Okay, that's an interesting one for sure.
The second one is Week 13, Black Friday, 3 o'clock against the Raiders in Kansas City. Because remember last year, Chiefs went in on Christmas Day and took care of the thing. And the other one, too, is a game last year that Patrick Mahomes was mad about playing on that certain day. Christmas Day in the same stadium where Monday Night Football is going on right now. Those are 3 games I look at where I'm like, Kansas City can lose. One thing I'll say about the Chiefs, too, is right now, this Chiefs team is really giving me 2015 Patriots vibes where they're undefeated. It wasn't the most exciting season, but then I think you remember this game. They lost to the Broncos on a Sunday Night Football overtime game. I think it was Demarius or RIP or Julius Thomas who caught the game-winning touchdown for a long drive. And then after that, the Patriots didn't look the same. They lost to the Eagles the next week. They almost lost, ironically, to the Chiefs in the playoffs that year in the divisional round, but then they went to Denver.
Who else did they lose to that year in the regular season?
You guys, week 17. That was the last time that Tom Brady lost in MetLife. That was the overtime game with Ryan Fitzpatrick.
That was like the last time the Jets had beaten them in like God knows how long.
That was the game before the streak that ended last year had started, which just started anew yesterday. So
I do think we talked about this in the offseason. Like whenever Brady's team won the Super Bowl, the next year they were always overrated the whole year. It was always they had this air of invincibility to them. Like no one can touch them. And really,
they have that now. They have that right now.
And it's the years the Patriots are discounted when they usually end up winning the Super Bowl. Like right now, yeah, everyone's like, LOL, the NFL's rigged. LOL, no one's beating the Chiefs. Like they very much like have no faith in them. And I think I'm with you where I think if they play Baltimore again in the playoffs, it'll be the narrative all week. It's like, oh well, you never bet against Mahomes, never bet against Mahomes, never. We said this last year. We said this last year. We said this last year. And then this time, I think they actually lose because I think the Ravens are better than them.
Like I said, I just want to see because obviously, look, they've been to the championship Sunday every year since Mahomes has gotten there.
Yeah,
I just want to see them miss it one year just to see how they come back the next year. Correct. That's why I think they've gone out and done trades for DeAndre Hopkins, Joshua Uche today. Because, and look, I'll say this right now, it wasn't the best return, but the fact the Patriots got something for him when he was probably going to walk for free this offseason, I was fine with that. The one thing I'll say, too, with the Chiefs is I just want to see how they respond because, look, this coming – I know we talk, Tyrone Tracy ripping off a run.
And there's no flag, fucking miraculously.
Oh, I got to sweat. Actually, yeah, I got to sweat for the next 11 minutes. But anyway, with the Chiefs –
They might go for 2.
Oh, they might go for 2. Well, I have 6.5. I have 6.5.
I have 6.
This is 6 if they go for 2. Never mind. Ooh. But so actually, wait, why would they go for 2? Because if they 17-24, but 16 tie the game.
It's the down 14 thing. When you're down 14, if you go for 2 and you get it, then you're only down 6, and the next touchdown will win you the game, assuming you can make the extra point. Let me tell you,
that was a great block set up by number 70 Hubbard though.
They're going for 2. They're going for 2.
Ooh, okay, but no, that's just the thing with the Chiefs right now, where it's just. Because this coming off season, like I know we talked about their cap situation, but they've got some players to pay.
Yes.
What the fuck was that?
That was the worst 2-point play I've ever seen.
You can run a bubble screen on a 2-point conversion? God damn it. But you know what I mean? That's the thing, because next year, like, look, George Karlaftis, who I think is a very underrated defensive lineman in the league, by the way. Trent McDuffie, all-pro corner. Leo Chanel, Nick Bolton. There's a lot of guys in their defense. I wonder to myself, how many guys do they have that they can sell on the precipice of, you know what, take the cheap deal and stay? That's my big question for Kansas City. Because, you know, like, look, I know Buffalo's been able to do it with like guys like Matt Milano and Deion Dawkins, but like how many players are going to go? But look at like Tremaine Edmonds. Or Terrell, one of the two.
Yeah.
He will have to go to Chicago because he wanted the bag. I got to wonder how many players are going to leave Kansas City to go get their payday.
Yeah, and like, I guess like people want to be a part of history, you know? So like this is depending on if they win or lose. Because if they win and they're the first team to ever 3-peat, then you have a situation where it's like, oh, they could be the first team to ever 4-peat. And you have guys that want to be part of history that may like take discounts to stay. Whereas if they lose, then yeah, and it just becomes another normal year. It might be different.
Yeah, that's just the. There's so many questions with Kansas City that I wonder. It's like the same thing to what happened. Well, I feel like the more the question of what happens when 87 goes is kind of starting to quiet down because we've seen him this year where he's been okay, but not the focal point.
Correct.
I just want to see how they use Xavier Worthy for the rest of the year because, it's, hey, can I just run a normal route? No, you're going to do a bunch of wacky, weird shit, and you're going to run this. You're not going to run normal routes there, kid. But that's just the thing. I just wonder with the Chiefs. It's not Chiefs hate. It's just that wonderment of, like, eventually, how do you evolve? Because that's what Tom Brady was so good at that I feel like most people don't pay attention to is how good he was at evolving throughout his career. With Mahomes, we're kind of seeing that same career arc. Tom Brady eventually had his villain moment. He had his villain. Basically, like Travis's girlfriend says, she has her eras. Just had her eras in your stadium. Correct. When does his villain era begin? Where he goes from, I'm not saying he's going to cheat or do anything else, but, to where people get tired of you or people want, or more or less rooting for you to fail, which there's one funny thing I want to say about this. I love how Bills fans will say, I want Patriots fans to hate Josh Allen the way we hated Tom Brady. And I'm just like, that's not happening. Most Patriots fans honestly love Josh Allen as a player. It just sucks he plays for Buffalo.
Yeah, I think it would probably happen if they were to get like a tuck rule situation where they get like a really bad call in the playoffs that favors them. Like I know they get bad calls like in the regular season all the time. I'm talking a playoff bad call that costs like a tuck rule, like that cost the other team a Super Bowl. Like that's the
interference that puts you in field goal position.
Correct. And because like if you don't get like cheating scandals, which is like the Spygate stuff, which they're not really going to have, I don't think. Then you need something like that, or you need like an undefeated season where you would also like draw the ire of a lot of people that get kind of just complacent with your success. So I would say one of those two things about that.
Yeah, and it's like I said, I just want to clear the air this again. I'm not rooting for them to be bad. I'm not salty or anything like that. I just, like I said, because he's going to turn 30 he'll be 30 next season.
Yeah.
We saw some of Brady's best football when he was in his 30s. Correct. What's 30-year-old Patrick Mahomes going to do? That's my big question.
It's an interesting question. I'm curious to find out and watch it together.
We're going to keep doing that because Big Rat, I know you've been great. We've had a lot of podcasts recently. You'll be back probably for a few weeks when we go back down to South Beach.
Sure. They keep putting the Giants on primetime. That's why I keep coming on here. Unless we do
want to do next Sunday morning and be sickos, but I don't really think we want to do that to ourselves.
That'd be yeah. That's not real primetime. And they're playing the Panthers of all fucking teams. Like that's
and they put MGK as the halftime show.
Yeah, come on. That's Germany's problem. That's not our problem.
God, there's been so many good titles today. But honestly, folks, if this is the last time he's doing this as a starter, if this is the last time he's doing this because Big Rat and I have done this for a very long time. This has been episode number 11 of Danny Dimes in Primetime.
Wow. That makes me nostalgic. Wow.
The first one was done out of accident. I remember it started because of his run on Thursday night against the Eagles. And then
where he fell down.
And then there was the game against my favorite, the Buccaneers game. This is one of my worst non-bets of all time where I said to myself, I was driving home from work that day and I was just like, why are the Buccaneers such big favorites against the Giants? And the Giants almost won the game outright.
They missed the 2-point play. Fitting, from where we are now. And like we see the Cowboys game, I remember in 2021 there was like a Chiefs game on Monday Night Football that we did together, and I got like really sick during the podcast, and I had to like message Griff on the side like I got to take a break, and this game is terrible. Also, it was like so like mind-numbingly boring at the same time, and while it was like actively making me sicker as the game was going on.
Oh my God!
A lot of memories, a lot of good times, and it may be the last one.
Good
Maybe
Lord!
We'll get another chance of him in another jersey, but yeah, it's been a fun ride.
If he's a backup next year, even if he's on the sidelines, we'll still be here doing this. He could be the back. He could replace Carson Wentz as the backup of the Kansas City Chiefs.
Yeah,
we'll still be here doing this. I still feel like though there is a team out there that will give him another chance as a reclamation project. It's going to happen. He'll take a cheap. He'll do what Russell Wilson just did. But you know what? We'll have to go from there. Big Rat. We'll see you in a few weeks because guys, we've got some great shows. Like I said, Alex Lorenzo is coming up Wednesday. We have the CFL playoffs, so a lot of stuff with there. Fun, big announcement. Squad goal. Sophie McGarvin and I, next Thursday night, we are back as a halfway preview for the Patriots as the three of us talk. And McGarvin's has been on a while, so it's going to be fun. But for Big Rat, I'm Griff. Episode 322 in the bag. Danny Dimes, keep diming in primetime.